we hear the word, know your why. We hear that phrase all the time, right? And it almost sounds pedantic at some point.
Yeah.
But honest to God, the only person who can keep you motivated when you're at your lowest, the only person who's going to believe in you when everybody else is questioning what the heck you're even thinking about doing, the only person who can get you out of those dark places is going to be you. There's no one better to speak to you in that moment than you. And you might not be strong enough in that moment to pull yourself out, but the version of you who was motivated and knew why you wanted to go in the first place, that is the person who can motivate you. So write down all those reasons why.
Hello, you are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast, where we are reimagining and redefining what it means to be in midlife, where we are gathering energy, momentum, and excitement for our next chapter via candid conversations with other midlifers about their own pivots, pitfalls, and triumphs. I'm Yvonne Marchese, your host, and I'm so happy you're here. My guest today is Jaime Legagneur. She's known to many in the podcasting community as Producer Jemmy. And she's a little younger than my average guest at the age of 42, but she is wise. Jemmy's midlife reinvention story began in her mid-30s. She recognized early that she wanted more challenge, excitement, and freedom than corporate America was ever going to provide her. She's a single mom and a powerhouse. Her list of accomplishments since she took the leap into running her own business is dizzying. I'm 11 years older than her, but you'll hear me say more than once in our conversation that I want to be her when I grow up. Producer Jemmy discovered podcasting in 2014 and has grown her business, Flint Stone Media, along with the Florida Podcast Network, hosting and producing podcasts and managing podcast networks. She's a podcast producer, she's a coach, speaker, and industry expert who earned the privilege of being the first podcasting instructor for the Connecticut School of Broadcasting and was the recipient of Podfest's 2020 High Achiever Award. I can't wait for you to meet her. But anyway, before we do, I do have a quick question for you. Do you have a project on the back burner that you can't stop thinking about, but you can't seem to get started on? Or are you itching for a new career? Or maybe you keep thinking about finally getting in shape, or you want to write a book and you just can't seem to make yourself take the steps to make it happen? So I created a free guide for you designed to kind of kickstart you, to help you start taking the steps towards your next act. It's a workbook called 5 Steps to Your Midlife Reboot. You can sign up to receive it as an email series with some ideas and practical exercises that you can use over the course of several weeks to get past feeling stuck. You can do these at your own pace, as they'll just be waiting for you in your inbox when you're ready for the next step. I'll remind you at the end of the episode and tell you where to go to sign up if you're interested. So, okay, without further ado, here's Jaime Legagneur. Let's go. Hey, Jemmy, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to chatting with you off of Clubhouse in 3D. This is fun. Well, almost 3D.
I know. I get to see your face. It's awesome. Yeah. I love it. I freaking love Clubhouse.
Me too.
I can't tell you how often I talk about it on my podcast. It's a little embarrassing, actually.
No, I totally get it. There needs to be a Clubhouse for an anonymous group or something like that. Those of us are in it a little too much.
It's true. Oh my goodness, it's true. It's a. I would say it's a problem, but I don't think it's a problem.
But it's not. It's fun. Problems aren't fun. This is fun.
Oh my goodness. Well, here we are. I mean, there's something about you, Jemmy, that comes across so instantly. All this Jemminess. It's like, it's so good. You're just so listenable and so relatable instantly. And that's what I was noticing listening to your podcast. I mean, and I've been in Clubhouse rooms with you before too, back before I really knew you, I was in some room and it was business advice and stuff. And you were just so generous with your knowledge, sharing it with people and all that. And I'm just so thrilled you're here
because
today.
there have been so many people who've been so generous with their knowledge for me. And I wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for, Glenn the Geek, Jeremy Pound, and the list can go on and on of people who have really been there for me and helped me and answered questions for me. And so the least I can do is to give back at every opportunity that I can.
So you have a company called Flint Stone Media, which is a podcasting network for Florida. Right.
So Florida Podcast Network is a subsidiary. So Flint Stone Media is the umbrella company. It's a production house, consultancy firm, all the stuff. So I work with independent clients. I help build networks, manage networks, and then Florida Podcast Networks is underneath that, and it's kind of my own personal project. Yeah, my own baby.
Gotcha. And then you've got your podcast, Business in the Bedroom. Podfest.
Yes, the Podfest podcast.
Do you help run Podfest? Is that?
I don't. I get to have all the fun with none of the work. It's the best deal ever. So no, I got to meet the Podfest folks back in 2019, and just they brought me under their wing, and I kind of didn't give them a choice. I threw a microphone in all their faces and interviewed them. They got to know me real quick. But yeah, Podfest has been fantastic. And so, fast forward now many years, they have never had their own show. So,
amazing. And I've never listened to it. I got to go check that one out.
It's really good, if I may say so myself. And my co-host Glenn and I, we got the call to host that show, and it's been so much fun. So it's one of my favorite things to do is to
it's going on my list.
Yeah,
it's going on my list.
Yeah,
for sure. And then you've got the Palm Beach Podcasters Meetup.
I do a lot.
And you're a podcasting instructor at the Connecticut School of Broadcasting.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I'm missing a lot of other things that you do, including being a mom.
Yeah, that's the number one thing. I just dropped him off at school a little while ago, and it's I got back from dropping him off, and I was just thinking about, I wonder in his mind if he thinks it's a chore for me to take him to school. I literally just had this thought. I wonder if he thinks that, if he realizes just how much I love taking him to school. And so, yes. That's my number one.
It's golden time, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
My kids, bless their hearts, when they got to junior high school, we're too close for the bus and far enough away that it's a good walk, but not too far.
Yeah.
And I frankly would rather walk with my kids to school than drive them, because the pickup line is hellish.
Right.
And so both of them let me walk with them, me and my husband, whenever he could do it too. We would walk with him to school, which is awesome. You think about it and I'm like, oh my God, how embarrassing, for
But you know what? That now 18-year-olds, they may be looking back and thinking it was embarrassing then, but I'm sure they're going to really, really cherish it. So no worries.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm pretty good at embarrassing them overall.
Oh, so am I. My kid knows my act. He's like, oh, here she goes again. But he got me back. When we were in New Orleans, I took him to I went to college there. I went to Tulane. So I took him to campus to haven't been back since. So I was walking around. We went to the bookstore where they have, you can buy t-shirts and whatever goodies. So I was looking for like decals for my car. So we're walking around, and there's a decent crowd in there. He goes, Mommy, announce to everyone that you went here. I'm like, no, Jordan, I'm not gonna. He's like, do it. I'm like, fine. So I got it like all big and loud, like I was on a loudspeaker. My name is Jemmy. I graduated from here. And then I look and I go, are you happy now? So yeah, I raised him a little bit too close to the cup.
That's hilarious. And had I done that, my kids would have been running, like scattering to the wind.
Do it.
I am not with this crazy woman. And forget it if Bohemian Rhapsody comes on in the car, because
forget
I
it.
am crazy.
That's 8 minutes of embarrassment. Good luck.
Anyway, so funny. We've gone far, far afield, but I knew this was going to happen. I knew this was going to happen with you. I love it. So before you had a before life.
I did.
And we were talking earlier, and I can't believe how much you've done. You're 42 years old.
I'm 42 with the soul of an 82-year-old.
And it sounds to me like your pivot time, I mean, you said it was in your early 30s, right? Take us back to what was going on for you at that point. What drew you into the world of podcasting and communications?
So it's a world I definitely had no idea I belonged in. I was in corporate life for many years as a data analyst. When I graduated college, I graduated with 2 bachelor's degrees in business, one in information systems management, one in finance. So I kind of put those together and I decided to go into data analytics. I love coding. I'm a total nerd. I love coding. So if you say, I want a report that does this, me having the chance to go in and find the databases and find the tables and the fields and how they work, and putting the like, I loved it. It was my favorite thing ever, right? But then after 15 years of it and kind of reaching the pinnacle of what I could do, I was bored. But it's funny because in that life, you know, you're isolated, you're in your cubicle, you're scrunched down, you're typing all day, and you're doing your thing. So at the time, I listened to this radio show every day because they got me through what was now a pretty boring time, and they're hilarious. So I listened to them on the way into work, and then they would repackage their morning show as a podcast. So I'd listen to it once, maybe twice during the course of the rest of the day. So long story short, their show started to get deconstructed and then ended up getting kicked off the air. And I'm like, I need this medicine every day. This is not okay. So I started this social media campaign to get them back on the air, and ended up growing and growing. I ended up getting myself spots on on other radio shows to talk about it, on television news reports to talk about it, like big news stations were talking about it. I had festivals at this big the crowds at this big festival chanting KVJ, KVJ, bring them back, you know, thousands of people. We had Elvis Duran in New York chiming in to bring them back. So it ended up working. I got them back on the #1 station in Florida. And I was like, wow, I'm good at this. I had no idea. So I was bored at my career and discovering this new talent. So I said, why don't I start a business with this new talent, see if I can grow it, and eventually make the move and be independent, have my own company. So that's what I did. So Flint Stone Media was born, and it was born building websites, doing social media, anything that basically lent itself to digital PR work. And while doing that, I had just recently, like I said, discovered their show as a podcast, and so I was discovering other podcasts, and I decided I wanted to know, how do people do what they love for a living? I had been geared towards becoming a doctor, becoming a lawyer, something that ended up with some letters at the end of my name. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, what I really was passionate about. And then I discovered I was really passionate about this digital marketing thing. So I'm like, well, how can I really make this business work? So I decided to interview people who I knew who were doing what they love for a living. And I decided to do it as a podcast so that I wasn't the only one who had the answers. Everyone could share and benefit from this information. So I just started doing that, really not expecting much of it than just be this weekly conversation I had. And I completely fell in love with it. I fell in love with the excitement people had for being able to be on the show. I fell in love with the excitement from listeners, knowing that they had a resource that was guiding them in their pursuit of their passions, to know that they weren't crazy for wanting to do this thing. In fact, over my shoulder here is a painting by a gentleman named Jaffle, who I've known for probably 15 years. We practically grew up together in our various creative career paths. And he is now up for an NAACP Image Award. Wow. And when he got nominated, I got the text of a lifetime, a text from him saying, "You're the only interview I want to do." He basically granted me immediate exclusivity. My
jaw just dropped, by the way.
crazy. So this is what I love. I love that not only can I do it because I love it, but then I can also be a vehicle for other people. And I realized that this is what I wanted to do. So Flint Stone Media quickly became geared towards being a podcast production company. And it was years and years of hard work, very hard work. And I eventually made it happen. And so Florida Podcast Network was born about a year or two into that effort, when I had already started working for Horse Radio Network, which is a whole nother story. It was awesome. And really learning the business side of podcasting, which I didn't know there was a business side of podcasting. I thought it was all hobby stuff. But when I learned there was a business side of it, that's when I made the decision. And then I thought, well, I want a network too. And Florida Podcast Network made the most sense. So Flint Stone Media was built and grown to serve independent clients, so serve other podcast network. And then Florida Podcast Network was born as a subsidiary, as like my other baby project to get off the ground. And I'm so proud of it. We actually just launched another show today.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
So are you from Florida originally?
So I was originally born in North Carolina, in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I only lived there till I was about 3. So I have very few memories of it. And then we moved to Miami when I was 5, and we lived there for a couple of years. And then we moved to Boca Raton, and that's pretty much where I grew up. Yeah, I'm
there,
Floridian.
So so that makes sense for you to have this tie to Florida. And
exactly. In fact, it's funny. I'll admit something here. So when I was thinking about what network to do, my now friend Glenn, who's the founder of Horse Radio Network, he and I were talking. He was helping me brainstorm, right? And he's like, well, why don't you do something like, there's not, a podcast network celebrating the Black community or, Black achievement, anything like that. I said, I'll be honest, I can totally do that. I totally understand why you're asking me to do that. But that hasn't been the community that I really grew up in very, tightly. So I don't know if even though I'm Black, I don't know if I'm capable of being that right now. I think I can grow into that at some point. But I grew up, my parents are from Haiti. I was in private school my whole life. So I didn't have the African-American cultural background. I had an immigrant American cultural background. I went to school I was basically the only piece of pepper in a table full of salt. So I did, the only time I got to be around people of my complexion was college. So I wasn't really comfortable thinking I could lead that charge. But then once the idea hit for Florida, I was like, Florida can be so many things. And I know at some point I can have an incredible show on there that highlights what Black people are doing in Florida communities. And I'm going to do it. But yeah, so Florida Podcast Network, we talk about anything Florida based. So Florida industries. So for example, we have the Florida Beer Podcast. So it's all about craft beer industries, which are exploding in Florida. It's so much fun. To location-based shows. So I would love to do a show based on Miami and Miami's history, that, for example. Yeah. And then we have just really fun, goofy shows. So the show that I personally do, which is on hiatus right now because of the pandemic, is called Finding Florida. And so it was a travel adventure show. And so Glenn, owner of Horse Radio Network, was my co-host on that show too. He's also my co-host on the Podfest podcast. And literally every month we'd go someplace different in Florida, and a visitors bureau would fund the trip, and we'd get put up in a hotel and get to do all these fun, crazy things and put it on a podcast, and there it is. So yeah, we got a vacation every month.
Smart. So stinking smart. Oh my gosh.
I got paid to do it. If you remember, I don't remember on Clubhouse, but for the longest time, my picture on Clubhouse was me walking away from the camera, and I'm on a beach, and I'm walking toward I'm in the water, walking toward a floating bar.
Oh,
and that picture was taken. I'm actually being paid to podcast in that picture. So that's one of my favorite moments.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a dream.
It is.
That sounds like a dream. I want to talk to you more about that. Oh my gosh.
It is a dream.
I have a friend who I just interviewed on the podcast recently, and she's got this, she's from Florida, by the way. teaches at Florida Atlantic University, and she's
Oh, nice.
she's
That's
like,
right up the
we
street.
should do. She's like, when your kids are cooked, fully cooked and done, and we should go out and just you and me and John will hit the road and we'll just interview the coolest people in America,
Heck
and
yeah.
that'll be our thing.
Heck
And I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, baby, let's go.
Heck yeah. Let me tell you, once you put your mind to it, it's all about figuring out the how. Like I knew the what. I knew I wanted a network. I knew I wanted to be successful. I knew I wanted to be fun. I also knew one of the most important things to me, to be honest, at the time, Florida Podcast Network was born. I don't know if you remember, but there it was pretty controversial with local news networks. They're basically all being handed the same script. They had to word for word read these news stories, or they could get fired. This was a few years ago. Yeah, they could get fired. So I happen to have a lot of friends in the news industry, and so they're all going through this. And I realized that Florida Podcast Network could be an opportunity if they decided the situation they were in had too many shackles. They could lend their talents to Florida Podcast Network where I wouldn't put those restraints on them. So Florida Podcast Network, it's to elevate Florida brands, but it's also to provide an option for people who are really talented, but are stuck in positions where they're not being treated and valued well. So bring those talents to FVN.
It's one of the things I love about podcasting is the low barrier of entry. And that there's no gatekeepers, and your show is your show. It can be as long as you want. It can be as short as you want. It can be about anything you want. You can cuss. You can not. You can.
Exactly.
The freedom of podcasting is phenomenal.
Exactly.
It's what I've been looking for my whole life, Jamie.
I love podcasting because it allows you that freedom. It's so much fun.
Yeah. Man, oh man. I'm just agog with everything that you have accomplished. And I have to tell you, like, I'm thinking about your story and about how the radio station or the radio show that you loved so much was this launching off point for you. And, you know, and the age at which it happened for you, like in your early 30s, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm gonna get into talking a little bit about age right now, because you're on the younger end of people I usually interview. You know, for me, I didn't start.
That feels good. I mean, it's nice to hear that.
You are. Hey, youngin. I think about your story about your radio station, and I think back to when I was in my 30s and I was still pursuing an acting career, but I was listening to This American Life on the radio, because this is pre-podcast, right? Podcasts weren't a thing. And I loved that show. I loved the content. I loved the storytelling of people, just normal people. I really feel like everybody has a story that's worth telling, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And their structure, just everything about that show, I was like, oh, you know, I would set my clock by it and listen. And I started getting interested in doing radio production. Like, how can I do what they do, you know? But I was in my early to mid 30s at this point, and I stopped myself, Jemmy. I felt like I was too old to go back to school at that point, and I felt like it was the only way to go. So you did not stop yourself. And I guess, but this is a very long story to get to my question, which is, when you hit that point, when you were bored in the career that you had, when you started out, you loved it.
Yeah.
Was there anything that kept you from feeling like you could move forward? Was there a time before you made the move where there was that germination period of being uncomfortable and stopping yourself from moving out of it? I wonder, like, did that exist for you before you made the move?
I'll be honest, no, not in the slightest.
Gotcha.
But probably not for the reasons you might imagine. Because I know I come across as this very bold, independent, move forward, like I'm not right, like it or not kind of girl, right?
Yeah.
But it's really not that. It's really not that. It's survival mode is really what it is. And I didn't really identify it until recently. 40s is a really introspective time, y'all. So, but it's been survival mode, and it's because so in corporate America, I had pretty much every awful experience you can imagine. I was sexually harassed by a superior. When I brought it up to my female boss, they turned it into a he said, she said, and essentially punished me for it.
Which happens so often,
so
right?
often.
That's when people don't speak up.
I was fired when I got pregnant with my child. Florida's an at-will state, which sounds lovely, but it just means they're at will to fire you for whatever the heck they want, including nothing. They never had to tell you.
Right.
From the way that health insurance works to the way that hours work. I remember I worked for a company once. Oh, this was terrible. They had me flying to Ohio every week to handle court cases for them. I wasn't a lawyer, but I was their legal representative, whatever, who showed up with the lawyer to court. I didn't fly to Ohio once. I would fly to Ohio 3 times in 1 week. Why? Because I wouldn't get paid unless I was in the air or in court. So I had to, if I had a court date on Monday and a Wednesday and a Friday, I had to literally fly back and forth just to get paid, because if I wouldn't get paid for my time on Tuesday or my time on Thursday up in Cleveland.
That's insane.
That's insane.
Wow. Yeah.
I've seen entire departments walked out of offices before. Myself, I got really courted heavily by a company away from a job that I was doing really well in and really loved. And so finally they twisted my arm enough and I went over there, right? And within 3 months of my being over there, the entire department got killed. Not because of anything I did, just for clarity, that wasn't my fault. But someone on the sales floor walked out with a whole bunch of a printed data, and they got really, really nervous, and they shut a whole bunch of the IT departments down. I don't know what that had to do with the sales guy walking out, but it did. And so our department was on that chopping block. So just knowing that we're so expendable. Corporations don't care about you. They care about the value you bring to their bottom line. I've had to drive through a tropical storm to get to a job once because they said I'd be fired if I didn't go. Now, this is a job I could have just as easily done from home. So this just piles up. It was piling up. And I'm realizing I mean nothing to these people. And I'm spending so much of my life, and it hit me. This is not what life was supposed to be. We weren't meant to sit in a car for half hour, 45 minutes to go to a job where we spend 8 hours, 10 hours a day earning a paycheck to pay for the things we can't enjoy because we're in the car and then in the office forever. You're paying for this house, you're never there. You're it's so ridiculous. This is stupid.
It's a crazy loop, isn't it?
It is stupid. So I realized this is not for me. So when I say I was in survival mode, I mean, I had to figure out a way that I knew I couldn't survive and be a happy mother or human in this corporate life anymore. So I had to do something about it. So this opportunity, when I realized I had this talent, I'm like, this is what I need. I need to take this and run with it. And it is hard. It was late nights. I get home from work and I had a baby, but I'd feed him and I'd be feeding him with one hand and working on something with the other, my website or whatever, something for a client or doing whatever I had to do, nights, weekends, everything else. I got migraines because of it. It was a lot of hard work, but I had to do it. I couldn't tell myself I didn't have an option not to do it. I didn't have a safety net. I don't have, I don't come from wealth. My son's father was useless. And so it was literally me, homeless, practically shiftless, without a job at one point. I'd been to the bottom of the barrel. And so at the time this decision was made, yes, I was working again, but I realized I was still on the same path. I was still in this spin cycle. Even if things were pretty good at this job that I was at now, there's no telling when some boss who doesn't know me in some office remote somewhere else might make a decision And all he does is sign some piece of paper, and all of a sudden my job no longer exists.
Yeah.
And that lack of control, and also that lack of that sense of not being able to make decisions on when I take my son to the doctor, or being able to be home with him when he's sick, being able to go to whatever event at his game. I knew that's not the life I wanted. And I was motivated by the life I did want. And now I know, like, before the pandemic, when field trips were still a thing, I was the mom who was at every field trip volunteering and chaperoning. You know, I loved it. I got to bring cupcakes in for my kid's birthday. Like, that's what I was working for. And I knew what I was wanting to do. I knew what I was turning away from. So I had to keep going. And so one thing I will, as a piece of advice for those listening, is we hear the word, know your why. We hear that phrase all the time, right? And it almost sounds pedantic at some point.
Yeah.
But honest to God, the only person who can keep you motivated when you're at your lowest, the only person who's going to believe in you when everybody else is questioning what the heck you're even thinking about doing, the only person who can get you out of those dark places is going to be you. There's no one better to speak to you in that moment than you. And you might not be strong enough in that moment to pull yourself out, but the version of you who was motivated and knew why you wanted to go in the first place, that is the person who can motivate you. So write down all those reasons why. And they can be anything from, like, literally, I want to own a company where I make millions of dollars. I can take vacations whenever I want, to I want to be able to bring cupcakes to my kid's school on his birthday, like all those things, so that when you are thinking, I don't know if I can do this, or I'm doubting myself or whatever, that you are your own voice telling yourself, girl, get back up here and get it done. Like, you can do this.
Shake it off and get up.
Shake it off. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it was really less of me being bold and really just trying to survive. I was trying to survive.
I totally get that. Totally get that. And good advice. Good advice to tap into why are we doing things?
Exactly.
Right?
And no one can better remind you of that than you.
Yeah. Now, you said that being in your 40s is a very contemplative time. Are you willing to go there? Tell me what that
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, right off the bat, I'm thinking, holy crap, I'm still not married. Like, I'm 42. I've never been married. I can't remember what a boyfriend even is. I don't remember what that is. So that's probably the thing that I kind of contemplate on the most. And, as we're recording this, of course, the date is looming for Valentine's Day. So it's super front of mind. I'm like, ugh. But what I'm trying to do right now in my life at this point is fix the 7-year-old version of me whose needs weren't met properly. Emotional needs weren't met properly. And so I'm trying to identify at this point in my life now, all the threads that lead back to that little girl, and how can I mend those threads so that I can move forward? What is it about the way that I was raised or treated, or the messages that I received about myself, that have kept me from finding a good, healthy relationship? What are the lessons that I learned that are stifling my ability to believe in myself enough to grow this business? I know this probably sounds crazy to you, but trust me, there's a lot of times where I know my business could be bigger and more successful had I had more confidence in myself in this moment, that moment, or the other moment. I'm doing a lot of identifying, a lot of recognizing of patterns, and a lot of healing of that stuff. Things that I probably should have taken place in my 20s or my 30s. So I feel a little bit behind in this process of life, but
yeah,
better late than never. And
I think that's a common feeling, Jemmy. And I want to say, I don't think you are behind.
Okay.
I'm just going to say right now, you're exactly where you should be. And I think that midlife is a time where, you know, there's the midlife crisis that everybody thinks of. But I don't really think it's a crisis. I think it's a deepening and a time when you can really go in and look at what you really value, and go in and look at what your 7-year-old didn't get. Because I don't think anybody's 7-year-old got what they needed.
Right.
You know?
Right. Exactly.
And it's a time to kind of like go in and reckon with all that stuff, and it's an opportunity. And you're not late. You are not late. You are amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing. And I have to say, I'm a little heartened to hear you say that you feel like you could have done more, that you had, you know, that there's moments where you should have been more self-confident, because I'm looking at what's on paper here and I'm like, damn, girl, this is like unstoppable.
Thank
producer
you.
Jemmy.
Thank you.
You know,
I appreciate that. But yeah, there definitely are moments of self-doubt that held me back. Like just things like getting an email from a client and being too afraid to open it because I don't want to, what if they're mad at me? Like those little things like that, you know, then that moment turns into 10 minutes and then a half hour and then 2 hours and you know, and making those relationships kind of damaging those relationships a little bit because of my own self-doubt instead of just acting and knowing I can do it. Yeah.
Man, oh man.
I think, you know what I think it is? I think when you're
I want to be you when I grow up, Jemmy.
Oh my goodness. I think when you're younger, you're looking at life as this never ending road ahead of you. And there's a certain point where you realize, oh, there is an end. And I'm going to get there.
And I'm closer to the end than I was.
Maybe I should be doing all those things I really wanted to do and doing it in the right way and being a better human. Let me start that. I think that's where I'm at right now.
Right on target, man. Right on target. And it's like it's now or never. You get that feeling. I mean, in a way, it's a blessing because it's like I was gliding along for my 20s, you know, and 30s. Really, it's just like I got time.
I don't know if I would have been able to make the decisions that I'm making right now, because I know myself so much better than I did back then. I don't know if I would have even had a chance to make the decisions that I'm making right now. Like I'm making much more thoughtful, less risky. When I went to New Orleans, so my son and I went to a trip to New Orleans a couple weeks ago, and that's where I went to college. So I was living in New Orleans, and you know, just as I'm on the brink of turning into my 20s and all of that, and learning what life is and being an adult, kicked out of the nest, all that kind of stuff. And now, fast forward, I'm bringing my 9-year-old to New Orleans to tell him about my experience and show him where I used to live. And I'm realizing, oh, here's where nope, can't tell you about that. Oh, but this is where nope, gonna have to filter that story.
The stories I won't tell my kids.
All those stories were done in my early 20s, and I guarantee you those stories would not happen now. Honestly, you just know better. Yeah,
I'm amazed. I feel like I've got some guardian angel on my shoulder because I made so many bad choices that I didn't pay for. Like somehow or another, I got through and I survived a situation that I put myself in that could have gone horribly wrong.
Yes. I think about that all the time. In fact, I was listing out some of these things. This is about a year ago. I decided to finally just start listing out some of the crazy stories, crazy things I've done, just to like really appreciate the fact that I'm still here and I'm not behind bars. Like it's been that crazy at times. Like what is wrong with Jemmy? But it's been all good, all fun. Yeah, all fun.
Oh my gosh. Jemmy, I could talk to you all day. We may have to figure out another time to do something else. I don't know. I feel like it's too soon to cut this off, and yet I'm looking at the time going, yeah, we should probably.
I mean, honestly, I've loved this conversation. You're a fantastic interviewer, and you know, I appreciate that you really did look into my background. I also really appreciate how excited you genuinely are. So you're a really good host, and you've made me feel very welcome, and this has been such a fantastic conversation. I'm definitely looking forward to another invitation for sure.
Thank you so much. And again, you know, I'm 11 years older than you. I want to be you when I grow up. I am looking at at everything that you are accomplishing and stepping through whatever fear is there for you, and just with massive admiration. So thanks for being an inspiration to me.
Thank you so much. I'll share one more thing on that note. A couple of weeks ago, my son and I were sitting down, and we oftentimes will be on my bed after school. He's watching TV. I'm getting work done and, doing my business from the bedrooms. I always do. And just out of nowhere, randomly, he turns to me, he says, "Mommy, I am so proud of you." I said, "Wow, thank you. Why?" He says, "Mommy, because out of all the mommies in my class, you're the only one who's an entrepreneur and who's built your own business. And I'm so proud of you."
Wow.
So if there's anything that keeps me going now, it's knowing that he's watching and then I'm inspiring him. And so for anybody listening, people are watching you and being inspired by you too. And we all can do this. We all can do this.
I'm going to leave it at that. I love that message. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I loved talking to Jemmy. I love her laugh. My big takeaway, is that she saw the writing on the wall regarding the social contract of corporate America early in her 30s. They were not going to take care of her the way she needed to be taken care of. If she wanted the flexibility to be a mom who could be there for cupcakes in the classroom and field trips, she knew she needed to forge her own path. And she said she took bold steps out of her survival instinct. I'm inspired by her unwillingness to settle for less than what she saw was possible. She was bored, not challenged anymore. And then she found something she was good at and enjoyed, and then explored what was possible and where she could go with it. And look where it's led her. There's something in her story for all of us, I think. If you want to know more about Jemmy or check out any of her podcasts, I'll have that information for you in the show notes. You can just go to latebloomerliving.com/podcast and click on the show notes for episode 91. And while you're there, you can also find that link to sign up to receive your free guide, 5 Steps to Your Midlife Reboot. Thanks so much for listening and hanging out here all the way to the end. I hope you have a fantastic week. Stay safe and well. Talk soon.